the next speaker is going to really take things to a deeper level. He is one of the greatest people that I know. He is one of my favorite people on the planet. He is someone who has influenced my life in so many ways. He's had such a huge impact on my life. Might be the one who's had the greatest impact on my life if I think about who has impacted it. And his name is Erwin McManus. And Erwin is not just a pastor of a church called Mosaic in LA. I must admit and be transparent, it's a church that I go to, that I belong to. But Erwin is also a leader, someone who has led organizations, someone who has led churches, someone who has led a fashion and design company. As you see Erwin right now on video, you'll see him. He is very fashion oriented and is just a brilliant mind, a creative genius in all that he does. And we're going to talk about today, Erwin, we're going to talk about the genius of leadership. You wrote a book just recently and it's called The Genius of Jesus. And you talk about how Jesus was a genius, but there's also an element of genius, I believe, as leaders. I know that you are a genius first and foremost. Just answer the question. Is there a genius in leadership? Can we be a genius of leadership?
Yeah, John, it's good to be with you. Thanks so much for inviting me to join you. And it's so much fun to do anything with you and have conversations together. But you wanted to dive right in, so we'll dive right in our few minutes.
Don't I always dive right in?
Yeah, I think some of what would help us is maybe just have a perspective of the history of leadership. Because really human history is a history of authoritarian leadership. In human history, we were almost like trained to believe there's an authority that we should follow without question. And so whether it was a king or a queen, a pope, a priest, a pastor, whether it was your employer, your master, we have lived historically in a system of authority where you don't question authority. You don't question the person over you. It wasn't even 20 years ago. If your doctor told you there was something wrong with you, you wouldn't even question your doctor. You wouldn't even get a second opinion. You didn't have the right to even question a medical professional. And if you could look at even some of the crisis today with, even with like vaccines and the whole issues with COVID, a huge part of it is actually not just a question about vaccines and COVID. It's actually a shift of leadership, whether we actually trust authorities over us or whether we're actually moving to this new democratization of leadership where everyone, in a sense, has a right to self-leadership. And I think this is important because once you lose positional power, like once you no longer have the power of, let's say, your birth, you're born a lord or a landowner. Once you lose the authority of even education or expertise, now you have to ask yourself, who's going to have the power to lead? Who's going to have the capacity to lead? And there's been a massive shift from power to influence. There's a massive shift from an authoritarian approach toward leadership to now really more an essential approach toward leadership. People follow people they want to become like. People follow people who exemplify the kind of life, the kind of essence, the kind of person they want to become. And it's interesting because like in the fashion industry, which you know that I've been in for a long time, there are some people who, especially American designers, who design for the market. They design for what will sell. But the more classic European designers, they design based on their lifestyle. They don't make clothes that they think you'll buy. They make clothes that they actually wear. And then that style personifies everyone else who also believes in that style or that lifestyle. And John, I think this is where leadership actually is going so quickly. The reason the genius of Jesus is so critical to this moment is that we've actually seen a shift from IQ to EQ, a shift from the amount of knowledge a person has to lead to now the emotional texture in which a person can lead. The person who's going to lead more effectively in this world is the person who understands how to help human beings become whole, how to create an environment where human beings are healthy, are alive, and are fully engaged. The idea that now you can just tell your employees what to do, that era is disappearing. The leader that's going to actually have a growing increased power or influence is that leader who creates an environment where everyone is most fully alive.
So in terms of this book that you wrote, The Genius of Jesus, can you explain what that genius is in terms of what Jesus had that was able to actually create an environment for people to learn, to grow, to become the best version of themselves?
Sure. Well, I spent 40 years, I think, studying genius. And one of the things that really just began to stand out to me was there are certain people always on the list, like Da Vinci and Mozart and Einstein. They're always on the list. But the one person who was so obviously omitted was Jesus. And as a person who's a follower of Jesus, I started asking the question just from a historic perspective. I'm more of an anthropologist. And I wondered, does Jesus actually qualify as a genius? And if he is a genius, why has he been overlooked? And if he is a genius, what exactly is this genius? And one of the things that really began to strike me was that to identify genius, you have to have a domain. And so for Mozart, it was composition of music. For Picasso, it was the canvas of art. For Bobby Fischer, it was the platform of chess. You have to have a platform, a canvas where that genius is expressed. And the reason Jesus' genius was so overlooked was that his canvas for his genius was the human spirit. That his genius was actually personified or translated in how people changed by their proximity to him. And what to me is so fascinating is that what Jesus really came to do was to teach us how to be human again. And it struck me, even as someone who 2,000 years after Jesus lived, has been so radically impacted by the idea of Jesus, just the possibility, not that Jesus was God, but that Jesus personified what it beautifully means to be human. And I think that has been a missing aspect of the study of Jesus. For 2,000 years, no one has ever stopped to ask the question, was Jesus of Nazareth a genius? Why does his life and message have this unstoppable momentum throughout the world, where his message permeates every culture? I mean, the message of Jesus is permeating throughout China, even under the oppression of communism. It is flowing through Russia and India, not just the Western world. It has not only transformed Europe and the United States, but it's transforming cultures and nations where Jesus wasn't even, where he never walked. And so you have to ask yourself, what kind of genius is this particular genius that is transferable to every person who draws near to the person of Jesus? And that for me was really fascinating.
Yeah, because you say that, like Mozart, if I could spend time with Mozart, I'm not going to become a better composer, a musician. If I spend time with Michael Jordan, I'm not going to become a better basketball player. But you're saying if you spend
or
time
even I say, even to make it more personal, John, if you spend your life with Rafa Nadal, you're never going to be able to beat your friend Pablo Lima in tennis. So even if you spend your life with Steph Curry, you're never going to be able to beat me in one-on-one in basketball. I mean, you just have to accept the fact that we all have human limitations and that genius is not transferable. And so you're right. Yes. If you spend your life with Mozart, you're never going to become a composer that's a genius, or Picasso. You never become an artist like Picasso. But the genius of Jesus is completely transferable. When you begin to give Jesus access to your life and influence, you actually begin to elevate in the arenas of intelligence that matter most for human vitality.
So powerful. Erwin's talking about a conversation we had yesterday with myself and Erwin and our friend Paulo, Jamie Kern-Lima's husband, if you know Jamie. And we were talking about Erwin's. Paulo actually said, I'll never beat him in tennis. And he said he would never beat Erwin in basketball. And I think I will beat Paulo in tennis one day, and possibly can beat Erwin in basketball. So we'll see. We'll see about that. But that was our conversation.
Well, you do the summit every year, and I'll be happy to come back on the summit and admit I was wrong.
All right. I got something to train for and something to practice on. And here's the thing. Great leaders make you better. And sometimes they love you, and other times they love you by challenging you. Erwin, in terms of leadership, is there a genius to leadership? And what do leaders who are geniuses in that field of leadership do to make people around them better?
Yeah, I'm convinced the answer, of course, is yes. The difficulty is that a person can actually be incredibly effective by being utilitarian. They can create a scorched earth approach toward leadership when they think to themselves, I can just keep hiring new people, burn them out, and hire more people, burn them out, and hire more people, and burn them out. And so they look like great leaders because they built a multi-billion-dollar company, but actually they have been users rather than empowerers. And for me, great leadership isn't just about you fulfilling your vision and accomplishing your dreams. Great leadership is about creating an environment where every person is optimizing who they are and becoming the full expression of their uniqueness, their gifting. And the greatest leaders don't just actualize their own dream. They create an environment where every person in their environment begins to live out their own dreams.
And what's the greatest measurement of leadership? How can you tell if actually someone is being a great leader if it's not about wins and losses, not about stock prices and outcomes? How can you tell?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll give you the answer I have for today. This is the image that came to my mind right away. If you take a large stone and you throw it into a pond, it'll make a huge, huge splash, much, much more profound than if you take a small flat pebble and throw it in the ground. And a lot of us see leadership as the large stone that makes the biggest splash. But if you take that small, thin pebble and you throw it properly and it glides over the water, it just skips and skips and skips and skips and skips. I actually think that's the better measure of leadership. Not how big of an impact you make, but how many iterations away from you are the people impacted by your life making an impact on the world and actualizing their greatest potential.
Man, that is so powerful. I got that image, and we often talk about the ripple effect. And that just exemplified that. You just nailed that in terms of talking about how leaders impact people amongst different generations, amongst the people you introduce, that you influence, and then how that influences others along the way. I think about how you've influenced me and how I'm influencing now people because of you and your influence on me. Everyone, if you want to know about Erwin's sermons or talks or messages, just go to Erwin McManus. Check out on YouTube. You'll see so many videos, so many encouraging videos. My daughter and her boyfriend just watched one the other night, and it was transformative for their relationship. I watch the videos all the time, every week, and they truly encourage and inspire me. Daniel, please put that link in there right now so people can follow Erwin and learn more about that. Can we talk about just real quick your fashion company? You're wearing these incredible clothes that you design. Where does genius come into that and leadership come into running a fashion company and also just coming up with new products that have never been done before?
It's funny. This morning I was talking to my wife, Kim, and I was trying to explain to her about how important it is to have a sense of confidence and clarity in your own perspective in life. I told her, I said, look, if you choose a color that everyone likes, you've almost guaranteed that no one will hate it and no one will love it. If you choose a perspective that's unique and distinct and new, you're going to have some people who love it, but you're also going to have some people who hate it. And I think for me, the creative process is integrated to the leadership process. If everyone likes you, you're not leading, and you have to create the kind of perspective and vision where some people go, absolutely, I need to give my entire life to it. And other people say, you're out of your mind, you're crazy. And I think sometimes we're not willing to press ourselves. And so part of the reason, I love designing clothes. And I think a part of it for me is also to expand the way people think about other human beings. It's amazing to me how, as a pastor, people would say, wait a minute, why is the pastor a fashion designer? Or why is the pastor a futurist? Or why is the pastor a filmmaker? And I go, no, you want to box people and say that all of us have to fit neatly into a singular category. And I want my life to be a living metaphor that you're only limited by your own courage. You're rarely limited by your talent. You're rarely limited by your skills and abilities. You need talent and you need skills and you need abilities. But what limits us is actually courage. And I just want to live the most courageous life I can. In fact, we just created this thermal, and on the back it says in French that art is an act of defiance. And I think all creativity, in a sense, is an act of defiance against the status quo. And I want to live my life as an act of defiance against the status quo in every domain where I can create.
Since you are a futurist, I just had this thought. Where is leadership going? You have led for all these years. You have been someone who has changed the status quo. You were meeting in nightclubs when no churches were meeting in nightclubs. Mm-hmm. You have been the person that people have emulated in terms of Judah Smith and Rich Wilkerson Jr. and Mark Batterson. They saw what you were doing 20, 30 years ago, and they're doing that now. So you've always been at the forefront. Where is leadership going as we move towards the future?
Well, I think we are definitely going to have a time of a cultural leadership crisis. After World War II, Germany had a significant cultural crisis of leadership because they had such a devastating, tragic expression of leadership through Hitler. And it was almost as if all the next generations of Germans were afraid to lead because leadership equated evil. And I think that we're in this time right now where people are almost equating leading with evil. And so what will happen is the people who are most resistant to change, they're most resistant to the new, they're most resistant to the innovation and creation of the unexpected. They're going to have more power because they look like they're not leading, because they're actually leading by pulling people backwards. But if you look at it from the flip side, it's going to create this massive opportunity for women and men who decide to lead with courage during this time, because people actually need leadership in their life and they long for it, because we're not designed to live our greatest lives by ourselves. And there are people that have this unique capacity. To me, the real evidence of leadership going forward are the people who create environments where other people feel empowered to also create and be their best selves. So, John, I think this is going to be a challenging time where in the culture, if you begin to emerge and lead, it's going to be like this tall poppy syndrome. If you succeed, people are going to look for ways to bring you down, to cut you down, to bring you back down to size. But you're just going to have to decide that the critics will not define your limitation. They will not define your ceiling. For those women and men in this time in history that decide that I'm just going to create with courage, I think they have a wide open space, because the competition will be actually less dense because of our cultural distrust for leadership right now.
That is so good. And when you talk about evil, you're talking about political parties. You're talking about different leaders. There are different leaders who we see as one views as evil, one vilifies, and the next one vilifies. So you're seeing all this in the news. You're seeing different parties. Whoever may have been president before, people hate him. Maybe people hate this new president. So you're talking about that overall. And then ultimately, what has to come next is the leaders who have the courage as we move forward. I just love that. Last question. You're from El Salvador. I am. Yep. And you were an immigrant. And when you came here, how important is it? What's that, Erwin?
What's that?
Oh, how important is it?
Yeah,
oh, yes. How important is it to have diversity in leadership? Mosaic, which is the church you lead, is the most eclectic and diverse church, I believe, on the planet. How important is it to bring diversity to our leadership, to our organizations, and what we do?
You know, it's interesting. I don't know if I can put it up fast enough, but I just saw this article that talked about the city council in a particular city, and it said it is expressing a radical diversity, but every single person on that city council is a Muslim. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, because they would never say it's radical diversity if every person on the city council was a Christian. And so we have to recognize that the word diversity doesn't mean the same thing it used to mean. That sometimes when people are talking about diversity, they're actually talking about a counterculture that goes against whatever is perceived as having been this country before. And diversity is you have a Muslim and a Christian and an atheist and an agnostic and a Buddhist or whatever, right? You know, that's diversity. And our community here, Mosaic, has been one of the most diverse communities in the world for 20, 30 years. And so this is not a new concept for us. But as a Latino who's an immigrant, I would say that a person, expertise is more important than diversity. That the moment you put diversity above necessarily qualifications or expertise, you're actually hurting me. You're hurting my culture. You're hurting minorities, because to lower the standard to say we need to have diversity is actually a very subtle elitism that believes that other people can't be as intelligent, as sharp, as skilled as you are. And so I want to make sure we find a way to not lower the standards of what we expect, but create more opportunity for diversity and for ethnic minorities to actually achieve that level of standard. Don't lower the standards for me, and just give me the opportunities to be able to climb to that standard. That's all I want. And I think that's going to be a part of the tension of the future. Do we lower the ceiling to pretend we're all the same? Or do we give everyone an opportunity to climb the same ladders so we can all get to this level of expertise to make an impact on the world?
So good. Everyone always asks me, John, who inspires you? Who encourages you? Well, Erwin, now they know you are someone major who influences me and encourages me. I think at one level, but I think people are seeing right now, you think at a whole other level. There's a genius there, and I just love it. And I'm so thankful that you're in my life, influencing me. And we really appreciate you sharing with us today. Thanks for making time. We know you're busy. We know that you have a whole new line of clothes coming out. I saw those new shorts you got coming. I can't wait to get a pair of those. And
you look good in them, John. You look good in them.
And talking about genius, I don't have as much style or fashion that I would wear like all of Erwin's clothing lines, right? I will not wear all of them, but there's a genius to it that appeals to a lot of different people and different styles. But those shorts, Erwin, those remind that one jacket that I just absolutely, what was that jacket? What kind of jacket was that?
Oh, you're talking about my cashmere overcoat.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. So thank you, Erwin. Thanks for your great lesson today, great message. And just, we appreciate you taking time for us.
Hey, love you, John. Thank you for spreading so much positivity in the world, man. We need to believe in a better future. And you're the person who always keeps us focusing on what we can create rather than what we have to tolerate.
Man.